Welcome to A Change of Heart podcast. I'm your host, Angel Walston. And in this space, we navigate life together. We ask the hard questions like, what is the truth you haven't told? But most importantly, we grow together. And sometimes that leads to a change of heart. Hey everyone, welcome back to A Change of Heart podcast. I am your host, Angel. For anyone, if this is your first time tuning in, and I am a mindset coach and a content strategist, and I teach millennial women of faith how to gain clarity in their vision, a strategy they can implement, and I teach them how to overcome limiting mindsets that are keeping them from fully walking in their creative lane. And today we're going to be talking about being emotionally unavailable and vulnerability. And if you have been listening to this podcast for a while, then you know I'm very well versed in both things. And we're going to talk about some stuff today. But before we get into that, actually I have a couple of things to talk about. So first things first, I just realized that this is this is the first video that I have done by myself since I cut my hair. So for those of you who are watching this, I said I was going to give y'all a video. So here we are. We're part of the cut life, y'all. We're part of the Pixie Cut gang. So I cut my hair, I think October 29th. I was just over my hair. It wasn't anything like I was going through this bad breakup. I was not going through a midlife crisis or anything like that. I was just at a point where it's like, I'm really tired of my hair. I want to cut it. I want something super short. This is the shortest I've ever had my hair. And so here we are, but I love it here. Second thing, listen, I said it in the last episode. I will remind you again. I have gotten some questions, but I'm going to remind y'all every episode for the remainder of the year to submit your questions. Ladies, I am doing an episode for men. Well, it's for my women, but it's going to be a panel of 4 men, and it's going to be Ask Them Anything. So whatever it is that you want to know, anything you wanted to ask a man that you have not had an opportunity to do so, here is your opportunity, sis. Ask men your questions. Ask them anything. So you can submit it using the link in the description box if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, or you can click the link in my show notes if you're listening to this on any podcasting platform. And your questions will be submitted anonymously, so your name will not be attached to it. So listen, ask the questions that you want to. I've got some good questions thus far, but I know y'all got some more questions. So make sure that you submit your questions. And last but certainly not least, we have our question of the day. So today's question of the day is, what is something that the pandemic has shown you that you took for granted? So like prior to the pandemic, didn't even really think much about it. Didn't think twice about it. But now that we have been living in this thing, in this whole panty, it's like, dog, remember the good old days? Remember the good times? So I have 2 answers because one of them is somewhat silly, but also very serious. So as I've been watching just different movies, TV shows, and things, I cannot tell you how many times I have seen people go into like a party or a group full of people, a room full of people, and I just be like, oh, look at them just having fun with no mask on. Like, look at them just enjoying life. That man over there coughed, ain't nobody even stare at him. Good old times. So that is definitely something that as I'm watching movies, it's literally just like, we were, young and impressionable, like didn't have a care in the world. The other thing is I realized how much, like in all seriousness, how much I took for granted just being of good health. Obviously with the pandemic, I luckily have not had too many times where I have gotten the text message, girl, I've been exposed, I done test positive, you need to get tested. But I will say, like, it definitely has made me want to take care of myself better, even though I know people who are very healthy and they have tested positive for COVID. But it really has made me realize just like how much I took for granted in regards to just like my health and well-being. And so that is something that I definitely want to just continue to be intentional about, just as far as like being as safe as I can, taking care of myself, all of that. So y'all know the drill. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel, you can leave your answers in the comment section below, or you can answer it in my stories on Instagram at Angel C. Walston. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. So let me go ahead and say this. A lot of this episode is influenced by another podcast episode that is by Dr. Thema. It's Thema. And she talks about being emotionally unavailable and different causes behind that, different reasons why you may be that way, and also how to just work on being intentional about overcoming those things. And so I'll make sure to link her episode in the description box and also in my show notes for those of you who are listening. And as I was listening to that, listen, we family here, we friends. This is a safe space, remember? And as I was listening to it, I was like, oh, that is me. Like, it definitely, like, that episode for me was very eye-opening, but it encouraged me in some ways, but it also shined a light on areas that I did not necessarily realize were things that I needed to work on or change. And we're going to talk about that. I have like some highlights from her episode that I want to talk about, and I'm going to add my jush in the mix, if that's okay. So one of the things that I have said specifically throughout this season, I believe, is that I do feel like I can have a tendency to be emotionally detached. And as I have thought more about that, that's really not the right verbiage, because I feel like I'm definitely someone who has the ability to show empathy. I know how to show compassion. I know how to express emotions in appropriate ways and all of that. But the more I've thought about it, I've realized that the correct terminology that I've been looking for is not that I'm emotionally detached. I have a tendency to be emotionally unavailable. And I've shared in, I believe, Healing Your Inner Child and probably some other episodes throughout this season, because y'all know it's been heavy on the healing. And so we've been doing a lot of reflecting, a lot of self-awareness. And as a result of that, I'm realizing a lot of different things that have contributed to it. And so in the episode by Dr. Thema, one of the things that she was talking about is that for people who are emotionally unavailable, a lot of that comes as a result of your experiences. And for those of you who might be there with me, y'all know I've said that, I'm really working on being more vulnerable, being more open, and making sure that I am allowing people to love me well. I'm allowing people to be a part of my life and not just exist in my life. And in doing that, it is requiring me to really be intentional about looking at, okay, so what are the areas in my life that I'm showing up emotionally unavailable? What are the areas of my life that I'm showing up in a way that lacks vulnerability? And what is causing that? And so something that I've been thinking about here recently is that I realize that I'm very protective of myself, in the sense of I do tend to be more on the cautious side, just in a very general sense. I tend to view things not from a pessimistic view per se, but it's kind of like, so this is an example. I was telling a friend before that I feel like the majority of people, when they meet someone, they tend to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? So they tend to give them the benefit of the doubt in the sense that it's like, I'm going to believe you to be a good person until you show me otherwise. Like, I'm not going in skeptical. I'm not going in like questioning what your intentions or your motives are. I'm going to trust that everything about you is good and pure until something shows me otherwise. For me, I tend to go the opposite way. So it's like, I'm going to question your intentions and your motives until I have enough experience with you to trust and believe that your intentions and your motives are good and pure and all of that. And when I think about like what experiences, what are the things that have triggered that response for me, or what are the things that make me lead with that versus the other response, I will say a lot of that has more to do with my job. So yes, I talk about being a mindset coach, a content strategist. That's like my part-time stuff. But I believe most of you know at this point, I work as a pretrial officer. I've worked in the criminal justice field. I've worked in probation for 11 years now. Like, it's been a minute. And as a result of me working in that field, it's like you are not trained per se to believe that people lie, but you're dealing with a population, unfortunately, that may not be the most forthcoming. and you're dealing with people that are trying to get out of certain situations. And so as a result of that, you are you're kind of like dealing with people in the worst day. Like you're not dealing with people at the high point of their lives. You're dealing with people who are, going through certain things. They are experiencing certain things. And as a result of what they may be encountering, their behavior is not what your average person would be. But being in the I say all that to say, being in the criminal justice field, it definitely influences how you view people, how you view what their intentions might be, and all of that. And that is something that can play a part on how you just engage with the world as a whole, because you come in with like this idea that people are not honest, or people have an ulterior motive, whatever it might be. And the other thing or something that Dr. Thema was saying, is that when you think about your experiences, this can be that people are not really there for you, or that they're not dependable or reliable, or you've developed this mindset of being so self-sufficient. And I know for myself, as I spoke about in the Healing Your Inner Child episode, I realized that for me, I definitely developed a sense of self-sufficiency because I felt like there wasn't space for me to kind of have my moment. There wasn't space for me to be sad. There wasn't space for me to necessarily address the things that I may have wanted to or needed to. And so as a result of that, I've carried this mindset for a very long time that like I have to take care of me, in a sense. I have to make sure that I'm good. I have to make sure that I'm okay, because I don't want to put the burden or the weight on other people. So I have to carry that burden or weight. And that is also something that influences that's another part of your experience that contributes to how you then engage and interact with people. And so I've realized that as I've been carrying this mindset of being like emotion, I wouldn't say that's a mindset, but as I've been carrying this mindset of I have to be protective of myself, or I have to protect myself, it's a result of those experiences of feeling like I have to protect my feelings, or I have to protect my emotions, even because when I felt like there wasn't space for me to share those feelings or to share those emotions, what was the alternative? It was for me to let me deal with it by myself. Let me figure it out. Let me process this alone. And that in return now puts me in a position where it's like, well, all the emotions, the feelings, the tears, all of that, that's not something we share. That's not something we do with other people. We do that alone, which is not true. But when that is how you have processed things, then that is now what you do. And that is who you become as an adult. Y'all following me on this? And so for those of you who may also be in a situation of feeling like you deal with being emotionally unavailable, or feeling like you deal with struggling with vulnerability, I do want you to think about, like, what have your experiences been like? Y'all know we like to go back to our childhood, go back to our little inner child, but think about what have your experiences have been with people? Has it been this thing where whenever you shared how you felt about something, when you opened up, that it was dismissed? That influences how you show up, that influences how you share, that influences how you express what you feel, what you're thinking, all of those things. Were you in a situation where it's like you were the one who was like the strong friend all the time, the strong person, that you were always there for everybody else and you didn't necessarily have someone to be there for you? It's all kinds of different things. Even being in a situation of feeling like you didn't have, especially as a child, feeling like you didn't have people who you could really depend on to open up to really share your heart, to really share the things that you were going through. Think about what experiences have influenced the way that you respond, the way that you show up emotionally, and even when it comes to vulnerability, and how is that now playing a role in who you are as an adult and the adult relationships that you have. The other thing that she said that I thought was really good is that it's hard to reveal to others what you haven't revealed to yourself. And then now there's like this whole component of self-awareness, which we know we're always on this journey of trying to evolve, to grow, to become the best version of ourselves. Like that's ultimately what we are working towards, is being who God created us to be, going through this journey of healing, going through this process of really allowing ourselves to essentially shed the weight of things that we've carried throughout our life. And this whole idea about self-awareness, it really is a matter of you being able to, it's, let me say this, it's hard to be emotionally available or to be vulnerable about things that you don't even know are issues. And I wouldn't even call them issues, because you can be vulnerable about things that aren't necessarily issues or problems per se, but things that you probably do need to get out, things that you probably need to communicate with someone. And I find it interesting that sometimes we just don't have language for what it is that we are dealing with, what it is that we are encountering. And so it can be difficult to be emotionally available to someone when you don't even know who you are. It can be difficult to be emotionally available and open up and share and be vulnerable and be transparent when you don't even have language for the things that you're dealing with. In the episode Random Bouts of Sadness, I'm pretty sure that's what it's called, as I shared in that episode, like I have some moments where I'm just sad, like I have some moments where I'm just sad and there's no explanation for it at times. There's not really a reason. And sometimes I don't have language to explain like why I'm having a rough day, why I'm having a rough week, why I'm having a rough month. Sometimes there's not language for that. And I think that for those of us who struggle with being emotionally available, for those of us who struggle with vulnerability, it can be almost frustrating to be in a space where people may be asking you what's wrong, because they can see, they can tell like something's off here, something's not right, something's going on. And it's like, I don't have the language for it. And so that self-awareness part, something that my life coach had taught me before, that I'm very good at and very bad at doing one thing. And so the thing that I'm very good at is that I'm very self-aware. So it's like I know areas I need to work on. I know things that I definitely need to address. The thing that I am bad at in that same scenario is that I'm very bad at acknowledging how I feel about things. So typically I can say, okay, I realize that I am in a space right now where I'm in a funk, I'm sad, whatever it might be. But if it's like, okay, but how do you feel? Like, what are you feeling right now? It's like, can we not like, can we not do this right now? I don't want to sit with that. Like, I just want to get out of this funk. But sometimes it really is just a matter of naming that thing, like calling a thing a thing. And it's trust me, I get it. It's not as easy as it sounds. I get the challenge of sometimes you really don't know how to identify what you're feeling because you don't know what it is. Like you truly don't know what it is. It's like, I don't feel good and I don't like this. Like that's kind of the mindset that we have at times. But it really is important for you to be able to identify like, okay, what is it that I'm feeling? Like why am I here? How did I get here? But like what is it that I'm feeling? Okay, I'm feeling hurt. And here's the thing too that I've learned in trying to work through this is that a lot of times whatever the initial feeling is, the initial emotion that we name, that's typically not really what it is. So it can all start with, well, I feel sad. And it's like, okay, like what's making you sad? And by the time you like work backwards and you work through and talk it out, it's like, I'm actually like really hurt. Or I'm sad because I was really disappointed by that. And it does take a level of vulnerability to go through all of the different steps of like, okay, well, I feel like this. Okay, what's causing you to feel like that? Are there any other feelings or emotions that are attached to that? And being willing to walk through that and talk through that with somebody. Like it's uncomfortable, y'all. Like we know vulnerability, it's uncomfortable. But as you get as you're able to start to name things, it does help you to be able to, one, communicate better as far as this is how I feel and this is what I'm experiencing. And sometimes when we feel like we don't have a language for something, it can make us want to like either just not talk about it or like keep people at a distance until we try and figure it out. And sometimes we don't figure it out. But also sometimes having that person where you can talk to them and say like, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I'm going through. By having that communication, it really does help you to be able to get further down into the process of figuring out like, why do I feel like this? What's actually going on? And something else she said that just kind of like wraps that up was the importance of taking the initiative to communicate. And listen, this is the one that got me, y'all. And I have not done one of these since I believe season 1. But I don't know if y'all remember, the OG listeners, season 1, I would do the truth I had not told. Have not done one of those in a minute. Let me tell y'all, listening to this, I was like, ooh, the truth I had not told is that I have been using as a cop out for a way to remain emotionally unavailable and not be vulnerable, this idea that people have to create space for me to share. And I have as much of a responsibility to initiate the conversation, even if they don't create that space. And that was my takeaway from that I was not ready to address. Okay. Because I've always said, like, I'm really big about someone creating space for me to be able to be vulnerable, to say, like, child, this is what I'm dealing with. This is what's going on. This is everything. And something that Dr. Tama said is when we're emotionally unavailable, we're either waiting for people to ask the right questions, which is me, or we hope they don't ask us anything. But I have a responsibility in this as well. It's not fair for it to fall on somebody else or for me to unintentionally, yet still doing it, put it on someone else to create space to say like, hey, how are you really doing? Like, what is it that I can be praying for you? What is it that you need? It's not somebody else's responsibility to do that. Like, I can initiate conversation as well. And obviously, like, there are going to be situations where there are people who they just do a heavy dump on you. And it's like they just drop all their stuff. And yes, it would be nice for them to create space. But I also have a responsibility in sharing my story and sharing the things that I may be dealing with. And I have a responsibility to, I just had a revelation. Sorry for the clap. I also have a responsibility to create the space that I want. Plot twist. I have a responsibility to create the space that I want. I can't just rely on someone else to create the space in the sense of asking the right questions for me to be willing to be emotionally available, for me to be willing to be transparent, for me to be willing to be vulnerable. Like, I have a responsibility specifically in my close relationships to create that space, even if the person doesn't create it for me, because just as they can initiate conversation about whatever it is that they're facing, whatever it is that they're dealing with, I can do that too. And so the burden cannot just fall on the person to create space for me. I have to be willing to create that space and be transparent in my relationships and conversations. All right, last thing that I want to say is that something that she said that I thought was very helpful, and I kind of talked about this a little bit in my episode. We're just referencing all kinds of episodes today, but the episode where it was talking about like breaking the habit of reverting back to old habits was pushing past my own programming. And she said that what we have to understand is like, whenever you are like in a space of evolving, growing, trying to do better, trying to be better, all of these different things, you're going to experience some growing pains. And there are going to be times where it'll be easy to revert back to what it is that you know, because it's familiar, it's comfortable. It's like, I know how to do this over here. I know how to be emotionally unavailable. I know how to not be vulnerable. I know how to stay to myself. I know how to be isolated. Like, I know how to do those things. And guess what? I have done them well. And to an extent, our mind is programmed to believe, and it served me well because we feel like it protected us. And although it may protected us in the sense of like, oh, well, my feelings weren't hurt or nobody took advantage of me or whatever it might be, it's like it doesn't allow you to have the fullness of relationships that you actually desire to have. So although you are protecting a component of yourself, you're also hindering an area of yourself as well. But this idea that we will revert back to what we know, what is familiar, we have to get to a place where we're willing to like ride the growing pains. We're willing to go through the process of what makes us feel uncomfortable. And we're willing to go through the process of what is outside of our comfort zone ultimately. Because really what's happening is that we get to a place where our mind feels like being open, being transparent, being vulnerable, being all of these different things. We feel like that creates space for people to hurt us. And as a result of that, your mind, when you start to do those things, is like, what you doing? Like abort mission. Like we don't do that over here. Like feelings, emotionally available, they don't even go here. Like, what are you doing right now? But once the more you do that, and here's the other thing too that I am learning in this process is the more vulnerable I become, the more emotionally available I become, it does put me at risk to get my feelings hurt, to be hurt, to have someone take advantage of me, like all kinds of things. But that's something that I don't want to say it comes with the territory, but for lack of better words, it kind of does. And I have to be willing to say that, yes, that is a risk, but it's a risk that's worth taking so that I can have the fullness of the relationships that I ultimately desire to have. And in doing so, even if that happens, that isn't, don't look at it in the sense of like, I knew it. This is why I've been emotionally unavailable. This is why I don't open up. This is what, like, don't use it as an opportunity to respond in that way, but instead let me use this as an opportunity to say, okay, that didn't work. What did we learn from this? Maybe there were things that, I was trying to be like vulnerable, transparent, all of those things. And looking back on it, I kind of knew that person wasn't the person to be that with. I truly believe, and I don't know if everybody would agree with this. Don't take this as therapy by any means. I truly believe that one, not everybody is for you. But I truly believe that there are people who are meant to be able to go through life with you, that you can share things, you can be very vulnerable, you can be very transparent with them, and 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 have like these solid relationships that are safe. That is not everybody. And I don't think that it is wise or safe to just be transparent and vulnerable and open with everybody that you encounter, because everybody ain't for you. And some people want to hear about what's going on with you so that they can tell other people. Mm-mm. Read the room, honey. Like, know who you can be open with, know who you can share with, and know who is ultimately a safe space. And so, yeah, I wanted to share that. There was something else I was going to say, but it's left my mind. But so while we're on this journey of being emotionally available and going through this whole process of being vulnerable, I know that it is scary. Ask me how I know. I know that it can be scary. I know that it can be challenging, but I truly believe that in order for us to have fulfilling relationships and in order for us to have the relationships that we ultimately desire to have, it's going to require us to do some things differently, and it's going to require us to show up in ways that are not what our normal routines or normal patterns have been. And so in doing that, you may experience some pushback just from yourself because you are used to responding in a certain way, and you are used to feeling like, I feel like for the most part, people who struggle with emotional availability and that struggle with vulnerability, you are used to feeling like you have to protect yourself. And when you're always feeling like you have to protect yourself, you end up in a position where you close off certain parts of yourself. So I will say this as someone who has struggled with being emotionally available and struggled with vulnerability. I realized that I tend to like compartmentalize what areas of myself I share with people. And it's like some people get this part, some people get that part, some people get this part, but ultimately no one gets all the parts, right? And let me clarify that a little bit. I do feel like there are typically in your relationships, your friendships, each relationship serves a different purpose. So it doesn't necessarily mean that each of your relationships that you have are going to get equally the full parts. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that per se. But it's like there are parts that you're trying to keep safe. There's parts that you're trying to hold on to or that you're trying to keep to yourself. And I want to encourage you to find someone who is a safe space for you that you can be fully authentic. Y'all know we heavy on the authenticity over here. And that you can be that you can initiate communication and that you can open up with and allow yourself to be vulnerable and to share things that you would normally keep to yourself. Because I truly believe that you will be able to find more fulfillment in your relationships as you do that. And I'm saying that as someone who is learning that now. And I am not in any form or fashion at a point where I would say I am 1000% emotionally available. Nah, not there. But I am like, I'm genuinely working on it. Like I really am working on being more open and being more vulnerable. Like we've been talking about that all throughout, this season for the most part. And so in doing that, I am able to experience more fulfillment in my relationships because we are getting beyond like surface level things. So that's all I have for you all. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And like I said, I will make sure to link Dr. Tama's episode. I definitely strongly encourage you to listen to that because she has more, she's a therapist, so she has more insight to give than I do. So definitely listen to her episode. I think that will help this to come more full circle. But I hope you all enjoyed this episode. Have an amazing week. And until next time, don't forget, be whole, be healed, be authentic. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into a Change of Heart podcast. I hope you were encouraged, and please take a moment to share with a girlfriend, and don't forget to download the episode. Lastly, I would love to connect with you. You can follow me on Instagram at Angel C. Walston and at A Change of Heart podcast. Have an amazing week, and don't forget, be whole, be healed, and be authentic.